Hmm. Oh, Oh, hi there. Hee. That's awfully embarrassing. Just sitting here rereading some of my favorite parts. As the author, you think that I'd be sick of this thing by now, but it's just nice sometimes to go back and reread the parts that were my favorites to write and laugh at some of my stupidities and make edits for later. I guess I'll go back and edit the manuscript. Cut out like whole chapters, So that's what I was doing. Welcome back to the Shattered Illusions reading series. My name is Lee Hershkowitz. I'm the author. This is the book, Shattered Illusions. So today we're going to be reading from Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. So if you have your copy, we're starting on page 32. Okay. Clear my voice, and here we go. Chapter 3. You have to leave. I can't stand to know that you're watching me at a time like this. I need you to leave so that I can sink into my death in silence. You should not see this. I want to be alone, to fall apart slowly within. Give up your hope. I cannot bear that torn look in your eyes or the hard pounding of your eager heart. You are making this worse than it already is. My heart is exploding in bitterness now. My body is exhausted, and I cannot go on much longer. If you were in my place now, would you say the same things to yourself? If this was you, would you know the secrets and the thoughts that I'm clutching so tightly at the time of my death? I want to be alone. You will do nothing by being with me now. You are not in my place. You do not breathe my air. You are not in my body. You are a whole person. You stand with the rest of the world, which I'm no longer a part of. I am shattered. Chapter 4. Denny Michaels, Friday, August 3rd, 2007. I swear to you, I didn't do it. I mean, look at me. Do I look guilty? I'm the most innocent guy you'll ever meet. You've got the wrong suspect. Sure, I've made mistakes, but who hasn't? Do you honestly believe that I could have committed all the crimes you're accusing me of? You've got to believe me. I'm innocent. Innocent, I tell you. Those words didn't come out of my mouth. Sure, I was thinking them. My mind was pushing one thought out after the next, but my mouth was moving at a different pace than my thoughts. My lips were moving, words were forming, but instead of begging the cop to let me go like the coward that I truly was, all I heard myself say was, "You're a rotten piece of garbage. Go ahead, arrest me, you swine. You're just doing this so you could go home to that stupid wife of yours and boast. You're doing it to make everyone believe that you're worth more than that donut that you had this morning for breakfast. Don't you sass me, Daniel. I'm doing society a favor, trust me. The world will be a much better place once you're looked up for good." He shouted as he shoved me up against the cop car. He grabbed my arms and pulled tightly behind me. I tried not to cringe. I needed to be the man I expected myself to be, rather than the small, terrified lump of clay I was becoming. I laid my head against the roof of the car and held back tears. I couldn't decide what was worse. Getting arrested in front of the entire high school student body, or knowing that if I did survive the trip to prison in the back of Deputy Charles's car, my parents would most likely kill me upon arrival. You should know right off the bat that I'm guilty of everything I was arrested for that day. Stealing prescription medication from the nurse's office and selling it to those idiot freshmen. Robbing the cafeteria blind of every dime they made. I'm guilty. So what? Haven't you ever seen a teenager desperate for attention before? I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I'm sorry for any of it. You couldn't really expect anything less from me, could you? Deputy Charles tugged at my shoulders in an attempt to move me, but I didn't budge. I stayed glued to the exterior of the car, fighting with might I no longer had to stay put. He tried again, this time harder, but I stayed in place. Finally, he elbowed my back, which made me jump, and pulled my shoulders together, causing my back to pop in pain. I held back my screams. He was getting way too much pleasure out of it. The last time he arrested me, it had been in the middle of the night, with no one around to witness his courageous act for the good of humanity. This time, he was taking full advantage of his chance, knowing that my classmates, my teacher, my girlfriend, the entire student body, and probably half of the surrounding neighborhood were witnessing my arrest. Before I had time to turn around and face him, I was inside the car, lights whirling above me. "Don't make any sudden moves, Michaels," he barked as he climbed into the front of the car. I'm no stranger to violence. Anger has become my good friend over the short years I've spent in this world. When people look at me, they don't see a face, a body. They see a fire consumed by rage and by terror, a being terrorized by hate. People fear me, people loathe me, and yet they envy my ability to always get what I want. Sort of. The car was sticky, as if Deputy Charles had smeared the inside of his jelly donut all over the back seat before forcing me in. The station was only a few miles from school, and I knew that when we arrived there, my parents would be waiting there for me. I could just imagine my mother's tearful eyes and my father's stern, thin lips pressed into a tight line in anger. I cringed, not at the thought of their disappointed reactions, but of their shunning eyes. I could hear the voices ringing in my head. "You're an idiot, Daniel. I'm ashamed to call you my son." Smack. Waiting for the words to end was the worst, because they were always followed immediately by a slap across the face. As I said before, I'm no stranger to these things. The drive seemed to take hours. By the time we arrived at the station, I was no longer afraid or annoyed, just tired of being scared about things that really didn't matter. So my dad would yell. So my mom would tell me to go to hell. Typical. Nothing new. Nothing to get excited about. My parents didn't show up that night. I spent it in the prison with people who were real criminals. "So, what are you in for this time, Danny boy?" Dylan asked me as we entered the police department. He works behind the desk 3 times a week from midnight to 7 a.m., which is usually when I'm brought in. "You didn't murder someone this time, did you?" he added jokingly, a smile breaking across his exhausted face. "How many times have I told you not to make conversation with prisoners?" Deputy Charles asked him as he pushed me towards the back. I hardly had time to react before my feet ran off with half my body. Only my mind stayed behind at the desk. But I saw no point in dragging my wisdom and sanity into a cell with my body, so I left it behind for Dylan to protect. It was the 3rd time I had been arrested in 2 months. The first 2 times were silly incidents. They let me go right away, and I'd rather not discuss them, if you don't mind. This time, I knew it was serious. I had overstepped my boundaries. Deputy Charles removed the handcuffs before he thrust me into an empty cell. "Have a good night, Daniel," he said sternly as he locked the door. I didn't even make it to the bench or the bed. I just lay down on the floor and fell asleep right there. I dreamt that I was floating, through time and space, through the earth, over the oceans, floating in a bubble made up of all the hopes and dreams I had had for myself as a child, the places I wanted to go, the people I wanted to meet, over cities and countries, across days and years. I saw it as if I were watching myself on a movie screen, and I cheered for my victory. Suddenly the bubble popped, just like that, and I began falling toward the ground and all the things I had left behind. I heard myself screaming at the me in the bubble. "Come on, Danny! Come on, man! Don't fall! Fly! Fly! You have wings! Fly!" I didn't hear myself. I didn't use the wings. I fell flat, both me in the bubble and the me who stood watching. Where was I in all of this? Where had I gone? The light in the cell blinded me when I awoke. Nothing had changed. I was still on the floor, in the same position I had been when I fell asleep, but I felt as if a ton of bricks had landed on my back. I rolled over and lay face up, staring at the ceiling above me. Nothing. Just a black cell, a black ceiling, a black existence, and a hole in the wall where I obviously deserved to be. I tried not to think, but trying only made it harder. My mind was racing with information, with ideas, with a life far beyond the being that I was. Why should I feel guilty? Why should I feel anger? I looked around at the empty cell. Maybe the answers were there, but I couldn't see them. Maybe if I concentrated on a spot in the wall, the answers would appear there and give me hope. They didn't. "Ah, Daniel, you're alive. How unfortunate." I practically jumped out of my skin. When I looked up, there was my father standing over me, staring at me the way a vulture considers a carcass. Deputy Charles entered right behind him, along with my mother. All 3 of them looked as if they were about to pounce on me. "Sir," I said, nodding in the direction of my father. "Mom?" I shook my wrist loosely from my pocket and waved briskly at her. "Oh, hello, officer. I didn't see you slither in," I added for Charles's benefit. None of them said anything. I closed my eyes again. Maybe they would disappear. "Danny? Honey, could you look at me?" my mother pleaded. "Yes, Mother?" I shot back, opened my eyes, and glared at her. Her pale, fragile skin brought out her puffy green eyes. She had been crying. "Oh, jeez, Mom, can you stop, please?" I waved my hand at her as if to dismiss her stupidity. She had proven to me that she had learned absolutely nothing about my trips to prison. They weren't something to cry over anymore. Maybe once, but not anymore. "Daniel, do not sass your mother. You get up right now, look her in the eye, and apologize, you bastard." I snapped my head in the direction of my father. I husbanded my anger, waiting for the perfect moment to whip him with a response. But before I could reply, he marched out of the cell. "I'll be in the car," he muttered, just before he disappeared. I don't try to understand my father, and if I were you, I wouldn't try to play psychiatrist on him, because you won't learn anything more than what's written on the wrinkles of his pale face. He's a quiet guy. He doesn't speak. Unless he's yelling at me, of course. He doesn't react. Unless he's telling me to go jump off a cliff. And he doesn't really look at anyone either. My mom is the loud one. She's the leader in that relationship because my dad just hands over everything for her to handle. I laid my head back on the cold floor. No sense in getting up only to go home. I would much prefer to be where I was. Danny, please don't make a scene. Let's go, my mother said calmly, almost too calmly. Yes, Daniel, do us all a favor and leave. Deputy Charles practically spat at me. I half opened my eyes and glanced over at the shadows that had taken over the room. Every time I ended up here, the cell turns into a family reunion, with that idiot over there acting like a host or something. He always gets involved in places where he need not get involved in. Charlie, dear, she asked, her face in a daze, would you mind giving me a few minutes alone with my son? Sure, Pam. I'll be in my office if you need anything, he smiled, spun on an angle towards the door, and marched out. Deputy Charles is like butter in my mother's hands. He always has been. Not that it bothers me. It always gets me whatever I want because he practically bows to her. Pisses off my old man, though. My mom and Charlie have been friends since grade school. They grew up here, attended the same schools, had the same group of friends. They're a cliche out of one of those sappy teenage novels you see at a checkout aisle of the supermarket. Friends forever, always together, blah, blah, blah. Much to the dismay of my father and Charlie's wife, Samantha. I bet my mother never imagined that, one day, her best friend would have to arrest her son repeatedly. Danny, please don't be upset, my mother said, sitting down. Right away, I knew whatever was about to come out of her mouth would be very bad. Let me guess. You're not going to bail me out this time. I'm just going to hang out here until Charlie kills me, or I learn how to carve a hole through the wall and get out by myself. I'm sending you to live with your Uncle James, she said very quickly. Excuse me? I asked, startled. I have an uncle named James? Don't be silly. You know, James, your father's youngest brother, she said, surprised that I couldn't remember this distant relative. Thought long and hard about who he was, but nothing came to mind. Finally, it clicked. You mean his brother that lives in America? You've got to be kidding. You can't ship me out all the way there to live with a complete stranger. I don't even know the guy. I've never seen him in my life. Hell, Dad hasn't spoken to him in like 19 years, and now you're ready to ship me to that dump to live with him? No. Absolutely not. Not happening. No thank you. I'll stay here and let Charlie strangle me with his bare hands. I'm not leaving. Caught my breath in enough time to think about it while my mother lectured me on the importance of getting a second chance at a childhood that I had never had and growing in a new environment. I stopped listening when she declared, This will be good for you, Daniel. You'll get to learn new things about yourself. She used that line on me when I was a child, whenever she tried to push me to try out for a school program or club. Once, she was so persuasive I was almost forced to join the theater group, but I had enough time between her lecture and the next morning at school in front of the spring musical sign-up sheet to talk myself out of it. Okay, fine. I'll go. When do I leave? I asked coldly. Tomorrow, my mother sneered. What? I'm leaving, like, now? Just like that, without warning, you're shipping me off to the United States? Don't I get a say in this? I shouted. Danny, don't make this any harder on us than this already is. We can't deal with your damage anymore. We simply can't, she added flatly. So, what? You're just sending me to live with someone who you think can handle my problems for you? Mom, you can't just do that. Watch me, she said. She lifted her head, turned, and left. 24 hours later, I was on board a flight to the New Orleans airport. I arrived in Louisiana on December 15th, 2006, only 8 short months ago. Who would have imagined that so much could occur in so little time? That's where we're going to stop today. Bottom of page 38. I hope you enjoyed, and I finally did an accent, guys! I didn't do the Australian one yet, but I'll get there! Yay! Okay. So that was that. Thanks for tuning in. If you don't already own your copy of Shattered Illusions and would like to, the links to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and my website are down there. You'll be able to find them. You know where to look. The link to the copies on my website is for signed copies. So, yeah, awesome. Alright, see you guys later. Bye!